Family Day in Toronto looks a lot like this. A gray, damp morning, Olympic hockey on in the background, and city services running on a slightly different rhythm. Later in the brief, we'll come back to one Ontario story that could change what families pay for college starting this fall. Toronto's weather first, around 3 degrees today with light rain. And because it's Family Day, a quick practical note if you're out. A lot of the big attractions are open with holiday hours. Places like the Zoo, the ROM, the AGO, the Aquarium, the CN Tower, and the Hockey Hall of Fame. Transit is on a holiday schedule across the region, so it's worth checking before you head out. Garbage and Canada Post are running as normal in Toronto. In Ontario, a couple of safety updates to flag. Police in Kitchener are treating a parking garage fire at a residential building as suspicious. Residents have been relocated while repairs and safety checks happen. And in Ajax, a damaged plaza building is now under an emergency order to be demolished, after a structural assessment found it unsafe. Demolition is expected to take about a week. Turning now to accountability and oversight, because a few separate developments are pointing in the same direction across Ontario. More scrutiny, more formal reviews, and more pressure on public institutions to show their work. The biggest single move here is a province-wide review of all 45 police forces, announced by Ontario's Inspector General of Policing, following the Toronto corruption scandal, involving 7 Toronto officers and a retired constable. The Inspector General says an external lead will be appointed to run the work as a safeguard. But here's the key point. Even supporters of the review are questioning its scope. A former chair of the Toronto Police Services Board argues the review should focus first and only on Toronto to get faster, clearer answers, rather than spreading attention across the entire province at once. Around that same Toronto investigation, York police say they've arrested 27 people across the GTA, with charges that include attempted murder, breach of trust, and trafficking police uniforms. In Durham, Regional Council is moving in a different, symbolic direction, voting to seek removal of ceremonial titles and public honors for current or former officers named in an oversight investigation into workplace harassment and what investigators called a poisoned environment. Council also wants an unredacted version of that report and regular updates on implementing dozens of recommendations. And in Toronto City Government, the Auditor General has added fresh examples to the fraud and waste file, including missing packages from mailrooms, time theft, an employee working another job while on paid sick leave, and a retired employee's credentials being used in an attempted $2.5 million electricity fraud. The risk here isn't just money, it's trust, and the knock-on effect it can have on morale inside big institutions, and confidence outside them. Now the Ontario decision that could land directly on family budgets, and this is the one I mentioned at the top. Ontario is ending its tuition freeze, and at the same time, it's changing how OSAP grants are calculated. The province says colleges and universities will share a $6.4 billion funding model over 4 years. The government calls it historic. But the OSAP shift is what students are watching closely. Under the new formula, maximum grant eligibility drops from 85% to 25% of assessed need, starting this fall. Grants are the part students don't repay, so the immediate practical impact, based on examples being cited, is more borrowing and potentially more debt after graduation. Why this matters locally: Toronto draws students from across Ontario and beyond, and cost pressures don't stop at tuition. Rent, transit, and groceries all sit on top of that monthly budget. Colleges are also signaling uncertainty. One Ottawa area college has already postponed a decision on suspending dozens of programs while it waits to see what the funding changes mean in practice. What happens next is pretty straightforward on timing. Schools will set tuition decisions as the freeze lifts, and students will find out how their OSAP offers change as applications roll into the next cycle. Quickly to sports, with Toronto ties and an Olympic angle. At the Winter Olympics, the U.S. men's hockey team finished group play 3-0 after beating Germany 5-1. Austin Matthews scored twice in that one, and the Americans earned an automatic quarterfinal berth. But they're seeded second overall behind Canada, because Canada ran up the goal differential with a 10-2 win over France. Mid-episode check-in. Remember that seeding detail. It shapes the path. The U.S. is set to face the winner of Sweden versus Latvia in the quarterfinals, while Canada will wait for the winner of Czechia versus Denmark. And in the NBA, the league's new USA vs. World All-Star setup debuted with short 12-minute minigames. It produced a few tight finishes early and then a one-sided final. Anthony Edwards took MVP, and Raptors fans got a highlight with Scotty Barnes hitting a walk-off three in overtime in the opener. Final piece to watch as today settles in Ontario, keep an eye on how that province-wide policing review is structured. Who leads it, what gets prioritized, and how quickly anything concrete comes back on Toronto specifically. And for families thinking ahead to September, the timelines on tuition decisions and OSAP assessments are the ones that will matter most. That's the brief for Monday, February 16th. Stay steady, and I'll be watching what's next.